acknowledge the traditional owners of the land that we gather on today and pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging. I am honoured to be here with you today to celebrate International Women's Day and to share my journey with you. Now, one of the things that happens when someone reads my bio or introduces me is I have this automatic reaction and think to myself, who are they talking about? And who is that woman? The reality is, when we create our bios or those reels, we pick the highlight reel. We pick the best parts of our story to share. Bios are interesting though. They are designed to purely be the highlight reel, the best parts of our lives that we put in flashing lights. But is there more to us than our highlight reel? And I'm curious to discuss how we can support each other to share our full story. Now, I understand that my highlight reel is pretty fantastic. I have worked really hard to make it so. And during that time, I've picked, chosen and curated all of the best parts to share with people just like you. Now, this is not to say that my list of accomplishments is not real. I have done all of those things, but I am really conscious that it has taken an entire journey to get to where I am today. So today I'd like to walk us on our journey. I'm really glad I didn't do slides because that would have thrown me. But I guess to start off, we'll start off at the beginning. So I am an immigrant. I was born in Mauritius and my family and I moved to Australia when I was 5. Arriving in Australia, I jumped into my schooling years and the world opened up to me. Now, I was a pretty average student. I always passed, but never really had the right mentoring and support to really reach my potential. At the end of school, I did receive a place in my chosen university course, but I chose to defer and I got the opportunity to travel the world, ending up in London at the age of 19, where I had the opportunity to work at the Tate Gallery in their events department. Now, little did I know that working at this gallery would be a pivotal point in my career. It was the first spark for me in the events industry, and that spark would go on to light that fuel that I needed, that flame, to continue to have an incredible career in events. Coming back home to Queensland from London, I pursued studies in event management and went on to have 15 years in the industry. In the early years of my career, I worked on internationally recognised events and really found my feet. In 2009, I moved to Melbourne and my career took another leap where I picked up a role to manage a team of 1,200 people across the state, as well as managing a portfolio of some of the most iconic events in the world. I'm talking the Australian Open, the Grand Prix, music festivals, fashion festivals, you name it, it was on the list and it was exactly what I had always dreamed of and more. Now, at this stage, being in my late 20s and looking after such a significant portfolio and a large team meant that people were paying attention. So in 2013, I had the opportunity to move over to a competitor. I was tapped on the shoulder and poached to head over there. Cherry on top was the opportunity to become a shareholder and business partner. Now, I had never considered being my own boss. I'd never considered stepping into that entrepreneurial space, but here I was with this amazing opportunity. So I jumped in head first, and in the new business called Event Aid, we went on to do incredible things, which once again was another step in my career. It was made even more significant by the fact that it was partially mine. Now, what's interesting about becoming an entrepreneur, even an accidental one, is it's like a bug and it bit me hard. I worked out very quickly that I wanted to continue creating new things. So in 2017, I found myself with a real itch to go out on my own. I was getting to the point where I was done in the event space. The events industry can be really taxing on your personal life. It takes up lots of your weekends and evenings to meet really demanding event schedules. So I knew that I needed something that was mine, but I also wanted a change. So I found my next big thing. I backed myself to take another leap of faith and decided to launch a lifestyle management company, which is now my business, Organised Curate Design. I wanted to bring a service-based business to the market that had not been done before. A way of outsourcing your life admin and your personal to-do list in the same way you would outsource and delegate tasks to an assistant in a workplace setting. I researched the concept, and from what I could see, this type of service didn't exist. Now, what can happen when you come up with a business idea like this is it could not exist because it's a terrible idea and no one wants to do it. Or, in my case, it could just not have been done before. Luckily, it was the latter, and I went on to launch my business on the side of Eventate as a side hustle. And I became publicly known as Australia's first life assistant. Within 18 months, the business grew so dramatically that I resigned from my role in Eventate, jumping into Organised Curate Design full-time. I had done it. I had created something from scratch and made it into a thriving business. Over the last 6 years, as the founder of Organised Curate Design, I have shared my insights on mental load, time and task management, life admin. I've spoken on stage, on television shows, and also featured in newspaper articles and podcasts and radio interviews all around the world. I've tackled the difficult topics around gendered households, the imbalance of mental load between men and women, and some of those generational concerns that we have that sit in the space, especially as we talk about International Women's Day. I've grown the business to a thriving team who are based all around the country, and over the past 6 years we have supported hundreds of clients to reduce their mental load and tackle their never-ending life admin to-do list. In addition to my business success, I am raising 2 beautiful sons. I have a darling husband, and I am also the proud dog mum of a border collie called Louie. Now that, in theory, was a pretty great story, right? I walked you through it pretty quickly, but it was all a highlight reel. It was all the flashing neon sign of my success. In many ways, my personal story varies really greatly from the highlight reel that I've just shared with you. My personal story was the dark underbelly of my success. Now, one thing I know to be true is that when we choose to show up fully as our whole selves, and we take all of the parts and own our truth, that we have the power to move forward authentically as the leaders that we are. So, come with me again as I share the parallel story of the highlight reel and give you a fuller picture of why I'm here today. Now, though I have a very clear Australian accent, when I moved to Australia, I didn't speak English. Due to this, due to my skin colour, and due to it being the 1980s, I experienced racism firsthand within the first few months of being here. I worked out pretty quickly that I couldn't have an accent, that I couldn't speak Creole, and that I couldn't bring Mauritian food to school. I knew that I needed to fit in to survive. During my primary school years, at the age of 10, I was sexually abused. I was subjected to that abuse for 4 years. In high school, at the age of 14, when the sexual abuse stopped, the trauma did not, as I continued to still be in the presence of the perpetrator. And even though people knew of the abuse, the interactions and expectation to be in his presence continued for close to 3 decades. psychological and emotional trauma that I experienced has been the darkest part of my story, hidden by the highlight reel of my success. In my late teens and early 20s, the opportunity to go to London that I shared with you earlier was with my now ex-husband. During that relationship, I was subjected to coercive control and family violence, which escalated when I sought out a divorce at the age of 28. At the peak of the harassment, I feared for my life and sought out multiple intervention and restraining orders in place for my safety and the safety of our son. I am now in my 40s, and during the past 5 years, I have actively been seeking support to start healing the trauma. I have put clear boundaries in place around my mental, physical, and emotional health. I have begun to teach myself the balance between the surviving and the thriving. And I have spoken openly about both journeys, how they intertwine, and how we can innovate as leaders by actively leaning into our whole lived experience and sharing it with others, combining the surviving and the thriving. Now, I am mindful that I have shifted the energy in the room. Most of you would not have expected me to share such vulnerable truths about my story today. It's not what you expect in the way that I show up. I am a very high-functioning trauma survivor. But we don't have to be trauma survivors to live our full experience, combining our surviving and our thriving. We don't have to be trauma survivors to only show up and show the highlight reel. One thing I've learned over the years is I have always been at my best when I am in the presence of supporters and allies. Supporters and allies who have walked beside me and encouraged me to show up as a full human being. Now, I believe that each and every one of you holds a leadership role in your life. It may not be on paper, it may not be in your title, but as we go into International Women's Day this week and we celebrate the day together today, I'd like you to think about the position of leadership that you hold in the life that you have and with the people around you. Do you encourage them to show up and walk their path fully? Can they thrive in your presence? Do you walk beside them? As I was sharing the second part of my story, and I spoke of the difficult moments in my story, I'm sure that some of you felt emotional. It's a really natural reaction. Those emotions, those reactions, they can often mean that we very quickly position ourselves on someone's journey. For me personally, especially as I've shared my full story over the last few years, I have found 4 clear positions that people tend to position themselves in when trying to lend support. So let's unpack these positions. And while I do this, I would like you to think about when this experience has happened to you, be it as a supporter or someone that is seeking support. Position 1, are you walking ahead of them? You may mean well in the advice that you're giving or the instructions that you're dictating, but it is their journey. As a good leader and mentor, charging ahead and dragging them on may not be what they need from you. You could be leading them down a path they are not ready to take or may not be the path for them. Position 2, are you walking behind them? At first, this seems like a logical position, a good thing. It's their life, they're leading the way, they're making those decisions, but sometimes if you are choosing to walk behind someone, you may need to check in with yourself and see what that really means. Are you a burden to them? Are you expecting them to carry you emotionally? Are you expecting them to drag you along? Position 3, are you distancing yourself from them, not really walking with them at all? This one is tricky because we've all had this happen or potentially done it ourselves. You may think that you're showing someone empathy, but you are really showing them sympathy. You've distanced yourself, you're on a parallel path, you may be shouting some instructions or support, but because of the distance you've created, you may have othered them. This feeling of disconnection can cause people to feel pitied or ashamed, and can often do more harm than good. Position 4, the one I recommend and also choose to actively seek out in others and perform myself, is to walk beside them. As they venture on their journey, they are mindful of the steps they need to take. As their ally, you walk beside them at their pace. You share in their hard times. You relish in their joy, but you cannot solve the hard times, nor even create the joy at times. Your role is to be present and to honour the safety they need to flourish and thrive as they tackle the road ahead. Now, this might seem a bit vague or almost too simple, but it really is walking beside them, step by step, as they choose the route ahead. Over the past few years, I have actively requested for people to walk beside me in various aspects of my life, and I have also actively tried to walk beside the people that I care for. A few years ago, I had a raw and heartfelt moment with my now 18-year-old son. He was going through a really rough time, disconnected from his peer group, and grappling with the consequences of mistakes he had made. His mental health was declining, and as his mum, all I wanted to do was fix it. I had the urge to walk ahead of him, mapping out what we should do, who he should call, and I knew that deep down that plan was not going to work. He was a young adult, no longer a child, and it wasn't my place to take over anymore. Over the next few weeks, as we reached the peak of this issue, he was depressed and would rarely leave the house. It was a really dark time for all of us. But during this time, I would just keep saying to him, "It's going to be okay, and I'm walking beside you." I just kept repeating it over and over again. One day, in pure teenage frustration, he snapped at me and said, "Mum, I don't even know what that means. Could you stop saying that? What on earth does it mean to walk beside you?" Pretty valid, 18-year-old. I realised in that moment that I had chosen my position and I had chosen my language, but I hadn't explained to him what I meant and what the position meant to me. So I explained, we're walking down this path together and we are connected not only because I am your mum, but also because I love you. And even though I can't map it out ahead, I don't want you to be alone. So you need to make these decisions, but I will be there consistently walking beside you. There was a long pause, and he looked at me, teary-eyed, which is always really tough when you've got a teenager that's staring at you like that. And he said, "So it's like we're walking together, and I stop to tie my shoe, and you wait with me, and then I get up and we start walking, but I didn't tie my shoe properly, so I fall over, and you wait with me again, and you help me up. And we might go the wrong way, or we might have to go backwards, but you're just there consistently. You show me empathy, and you're just there." And I said, "Yep, that's it. You're not alone, and you've pretty much got it." Now he looked at me, tears now streaming down his face. And he said, "I've realised what it means for you to walk beside me. It's how you show up and love me unconditionally. And that was it. I didn't need to say anything else. He had worded it in such a way that was so much deeper than what I was trying to explain. Walking beside him with empathy and unconditional love. So, as I wrap up today and as we go on to celebrate International Women's Day, I ask you, how can you walk beside the people in your life? How can you share with them fully, sharing your highlight reel and your vulnerability? And how can you show them